Me noi tātou. Tīramarama nuku, tīramararangi ko koe kai pauri te ngākau o tānata, kia māwe te wete te ngākau o tānata. Tērā te tūwhiri ka tūwhiri, tērā te tīramarama ka tīramarama. He koia te mahara, tamohi te atamai, hei pau tūwhiri mau, hei pau kōrero mau, hei pau ātamai mau. Tūturu whiti whakamaua kia tīna, haumie huie, tāki. It's my pleasure to open this meeting, our bylaws submission hui in regards to cemeteries and crematoria bylaw that we're about to discuss. I want to acknowledge the hearings panel, both Councillor Foster and Councillor Thompson. I'd also like to acknowledge our staff as well, Ms Noble, Ms Knight, Mr Tamihere, Mr Rutherford. Also yourself, Tyler, sorry for forgetting your last name there, my friend, but I just want to acknowledge all of our staff that have worked on this bylaw, and I am happy to open this meeting. I will take us to, we have no acknowledgements and tributes. I will take us to page 4, and I assume that'll be you, Ms.
It will be.
Awesome. Hand it over to you.
I thought I'd just briefly outline during the, we went out for consultation in February. We received 7 submissions on the 10 proposals. So, as you can see, they were discussed in the report in this, and the copies of the submissions are attachment free. Nobody wished to speak to their submission today, so we just have deliberations, no hearing element to the day today. And then based on the submitters' feedback and any of the points that they did raise and additional evidence info, we have recommended to stick with the 10 proposals as they were consulted on. The only change that we included for your consideration was around amending the section slightly around photography to clarify that section a little bit better in relation to one of the submitters' comments around that. And I think I'll just take the rest of the report as read, and we have the wonderful Calvin here today to answer all of the tough questions. And yes, that's it.
Awesome, thank you, Ms Knight. I thought that because we have 10 proposals in front of us, right, and I think that there are some things that are quite reasonable, and we probably have collective agreement on as a hearings panel, but I just wanted to just kind of run through them first and just signal that I've there were some that were just 100%.
Table 8. The table on page 8 has all 10 in a row, if that's helpful.
Yep. So I wanted to see which ones that we had agreement on that was, for me, there was some, proposal 1 makes sense. Yes, let's make the bylaw easier to read. Yep. If I skip through these next 3 and then kind of go to proposal 5, guidance. Yes, we want to have guidance. Proposal 6, yes, we want to tidy physical works in the cemetery. That makes sense. Proposal 7 around removing the fee for babies. Proposal 8 in regards to the hours. Proposal 9 in regards to allowing animals that are under control. And proposal 10 in regards to supervision. Do we have kind of agreement that those ones are fine? Yeah, fine. Cool. So we can, our staff can take it that as the hearings committee, we're fine with proposal 1 and 5 through to 10. There are some questions around proposal 2, proposal 3, and possibly proposal 4. I'll open that up to the some questions or discussion in regards to those 3 proposals. Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, for me, proposal 3 is something out of our control, the weather and the sort of logic. Proposal 4, yeah, I think there's guidelines for the things, but yeah, just got a few questions on proposal 2, just in terms of the timings and just reading the one comment we got in disagreements. Yes, I'm sort of on the fence fence with that one myself, just in terms of sort of stressful time, and the timings and everything else. I get the weather, that's out of our control, but this is potentially something in our control. Just my personal thoughts on that one.
So does staff have a response in regards? So just for clarity, Councillor Thompson, your concern is around whānau being able to access the cemetery during a public holiday. Is that?
No, more. Yeah, I suppose that and burials, because if anyone goes with their father, so for me that's something the weather we can't control. This is something that we can sort of have a bit of control over to make for people. Yeah, so the point is accessibility of the community in order to be able to access the cemeteries, right? In the event that someone passes away and needs to bury them.
Yeah, just to clarify in terms of access to the cemetery and the way that proposal, that's around the burials, not around if you wanted to go and spend time with someone at their life. But I'll let Calvin talk to in terms of the impact of the public holidays or not, and in terms of
yeah, I suppose from operational perspective, it's probably more around resourcing and stuff like that, around possibly staff working numerous amounts of days in a row, holidays, and just, yeah, I think the backstory to it is the fact that council are suggesting that all their proposal that a little bit about staff wellbeing and stuff like that. So I would say there's probably options around resourcing and people and stuff like that. But yeah, that's my understanding. I believe a lot of the stuff come from a previous manager that I wasn't aware of that was in there as well. So
in terms of how often that you would actually have burials on those days that aren't currently covered, how frequent is that? Maybe that would be a good for the panel.
very rarely. So very rarely the funerals take place on public holidays. My understanding is that it's considerably a lot dearer to undertake a burial on a public holiday and stuff like that. So it is obviously, as council is stating, the option to have burials on any day is probably a better option for the community, but behind the scenes, probably operational wise, it's probably the resourcing, the cost of things, all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, because that was my my notes that I wrote down here. Was my question around any unintended consequences? What could that possibly look like? So yeah, that's a part there. Is there any way that we would be able to provide for staff wellbeing, or also being able to provide for community access? I'm just thinking that if I was to bury my mum and I had to be on that kind of thing, I'd really like to do that. So I'm just trying to figure out what is that way that we could do something that kind of hits that middle ground.
So in the current bylaw, there is kind of that middle ground, and there was a pitch for particular public holidays. You could choose to consider that list rather than aligning with all of that. But I think, sorry, Chris.
That's okay. So I'm the acting manager on an interim basis, just by way of introduction. It's interesting looking at what other local authorities are doing as well, and some don't actually sort of promote the fact that they're able to determine public holidays. And I think just from a staff perspective, obviously it's a very sensitive area, and if somebody has a particular need, then obviously we would meet their need. It's just really a cost to do it on a higher cost potentially to us as an organisation on a public holiday. So I think one of the suggestions we have going forward is that we maybe have the facility available as Kelvin said, it's infrequently called upon anyway, but maybe not promoted. So that's what I see others doing, is saying sort of Monday through to Saturday effectively, and anything else by arrangement.
Awesome. Thank you, staff, for your responses. I guess again, I keep coming back to that unintended consequence. Once it becomes a bylaw, then people can kind of like read that and interpret it quite strictly as no, we can't do these things, then that becomes a burden for them. I guess the thing is that there's at least that willingness from us as council to be able to work with whānau in those point in time. So if I think of, say, the Proposition 10, which is around that cultural supervision, that digging of holes and things like that, maybe there's those kinds of things that can be accommodated for, kind of smartly used in order to be able to plug some of these gaps. But, do you have any other questions?
You could just ask how many staff, because I know in the police you decide when crime happens, so you would have to work public holidays, and there's some staff who didn't want to, and there's staff like me, you got paid double, so you work one day and get paid for two. So there's a bit of it's good for some, but not for others. I'm just wondering how many staff you've got and the willingness to work on public holidays.
Yeah, so from the operational level, there's obviously additional staff members, but so there's two of us that can actually lead and undertake burials with an additional one support staff member. That's our operational team. So it's limitedly resourced, and I suppose the possibility to look at how those options can be delivered to the communities.
Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you. There is quite a lot of memorials, and I've been to quite a few on a Saturday that, like in huge places, and it might not be at the funeral directors, but where you're remembering a loved one or someone who's just passed, and I've been to some where there's been huge crowds, and the hearse is turned up and they take the coffin away at the end, and you just presume it's going to be buried, but it's obviously going into a holding until Monday. So when we do this, we need to be specific about that. We are talking about burials and not actual memorials, because memorials that's where a lot of people want to congregate and say their goodbyes and everything. And we certainly want to deter that. And
Councillor Foster, being very specific, that's actually in regards to
just the burial itself here, rather than because people would probably just define, generalise, oh no, we can't have a memorial on that day either. So.
Do you have any other questions in regards to proposal 2? I have a question in regards to proposal 3. Completely understand in regards to ground conditions. My part is page 12, paragraph 22. It's around infringing the BCA. So, are you able to talk to me about? I mean, if we have something that we're not supposed to be infringing, how does? Is there an alternative? Because it does talk as well about if there's no other alternative offered. So how do we do both, which is not infringe the PCA, but also recognise that we can't be burying in the ground conditions at a certain point in time, certain conditions.
In terms of, I guess, from an operational perspective, what you've done perhaps in the past.
Yeah, so I suppose I'm not the most expert on the Act itself, but my understanding of the legislation side of things is that a council must provide a form, or there must be a form of disposal available, whether it be burial cremation. So if you're unable to meet the burial side of things, then cremation is still available. So you are still meeting that requirement. Also in regards to that, we have been able to create a block at the cemetery, which is a vast difference in groundwater levels. So if we're not actually experiencing surface level flooding, we are still able to undertake burials. So we managed to develop that after Cyclone Gabrielle.
Awesome.
So we do have what we class as a emergency block that we can use in times of high groundwater levels and stuff like that.
Any other questions in regards to proposal 3?
I think from my understanding of that is when you're at surface level flooding, no burials can take place, so you look to hold the suspension of such times if those families still request a burial, so burials can take place in the mortuary or where the services do support us in that process. So.
No other questions in regards to proposal 3. I just wanted to ask around proposal 4, which is around the aesthetic guidelines. So obviously it's a very subjective kind of space, and I was wanting to know, and you speak about the aesthetic guidelines that are in that you will be possibly providing as part of this inside of the cemetery guide, so it's page 14, paragraph 32. So what's going to be, what does that look like in terms of the community having a conversation with council about what aesthetic is possible for them? Yeah, again, given that it's very subjective in terms of its intention.
Some guidelines ready. Do you want to talk about the current process, Calvin, in terms of when you receive the design for the monument and what you do? Maybe that would be useful. We'd still be doing that, however, we'd just have more, I guess, guidance for staff was the intent behind this proposal.
I think the majority of the guidelines to what you can and can't have on your headstones is laid out in the bylaw currently, but quite briefly. Obviously it does refer to anything that is offensive, so things that do come that could be deemed offensive by either myself or a manager, we then have a discussion around it. It's more along the lines of what was previously in a grey area around basically hate speech, foul language, all those kind of things that they could be deemed as offensive. I suppose that's been quite a big grey area where something more descriptive would help with staff sort of enforcing that bylaw, or not only enforcing the bylaw, but just having communication with the community and what they actually can and can't have. So.
In terms of that in the process, obviously the funerary monument companies have guidelines as that starting point, and obviously some of the work in the families, but then when it comes to you, if something does come up, it is a conversation with the family.
Yeah, so basically we have an application form that's submitted to us for approval, which is concept designs. So before we work with things taking place, which would be of financial impact and stuff like that for the family. So we have discussion around that with the wider management level to obviously try and fit what's deemed as offensive or not. It's, like I say, that has been stated in the previous bylaw, which is probably as less descriptive as we want it to be, but yeah, and then obviously it's either approved or declined, and then the families and then work with those monumental masons to alter those concept designs and yeah, have that communication with us for approval of those kind of things. So.
And I think the intent with this as well is that obviously most people read a bylaw, like it's not a very so should we use that word? So the intent was to obviously take the kind of this part of the bylaw and include it in a more friendly way in the cemetery guide and make sure that those, and obviously as part of implementing any changes, making sure those are communicated and given to the parties. but the process would look very much still the same in terms of that application, etc. It would just be, there'd be some slightly more descriptive rather than just.
It might be helpful, Kelvin, if you share whether it has been an issue for you. As the manager there, obviously you're sitting in the hot seat at that time.
We did hear.
It has
We
been.
did hear in the previous discussions, January.
I think, yeah, we went through it a little bit in the workshop, and obviously one of the ones has been getting insignia, which is, as we know, out of our hands with the legislation, but there are other examples that you've had to, I believe.
Apart from the gang insignia issues and stuff like that, which has probably been at the top of the list of the most difficult to deal with. But obviously now there's national legislation around that, so that's sort of this and that. I think there is some changes that we are hoping to look at, possibly with the removal of inscriptions on the reverse side of headstones. So it is seemingly opposing to neighbouring graves and stuff like that. So that's probably been the next challenge. We're finding headstones that are at the maximum size, height and width requirements are having or have had fairly large inscriptions placed on the reverse side of their headstones. When you look at, the plot facing obviously out towards the way we visited, and then families having to visit their the neighbouring graves because they sit back to back towards each other, then there can be a level of unsettlingness if they're, if something that they may not like or they feel like it's overshadowing their gravesite or something like that. So that's an issue that we've had apart from insignia and stuff like that.
Those are all of my questions in regards to these proposals. Do you have any? Awesome. So yes, I'm comfortable with where, and if we are as a committee, we're at in regards to proposal 3, proposal 4. And again, in regards to proposal 4, it's got that those conversations which I hear, I will have assurance from about how we have those discussions with the community, and I think it's quite heartening to hear that logically we can't control the weather, and we have to close the cemetery, but we're making every effort and endeavour in order to be able to provide alternatives to bury on site at a raised spot, or if not that, then in the other ways that Kelvin had described. I just needed to get consensus in regards to proposal 2. So around public holiday, I'm personally comfortable with the staff's response.
Yep, I'm comfortable with it.
So yeah, Councillor Thompson. They can understand the.
I do have the current burial fees here, so you can kind of get a feel for what the cost implication is. I can read those out for you.
You'd on charge those?
Yeah, so I've got those here so that you can see what the cost is. It's over double
The burial on public
on a
holiday.
state holiday.
Yeah, the other thing.
Yeah.
Sort of steer people away from it.
Yeah.
It is an option, but it's a very one that's a very costly option.
Yeah, and I mean that being a higher cost makes complete financial sense if, as Councillor Thompson alluded to, the double paying that versus all of those costs. Sorry, Councillor Foster, did you have something?
No, I'm fine.
In terms of options that you consulted on, there was the status quo with just the 4 public holidays, as well as aligning to the definition of holidays, just for clarity.
Yeah, and that's thank you for that making that point tonight, because that for the thousands and myriads of people that are watching this panel right now, it is really important to recognise that also part of our function as a council is to ensure that our bylaws align as closely as they can to national legislation. legislation. So it's always good for us to be on the same page that everybody else is when they're thinking of public holidays. They're also thinking of, matariki, all of these other, waitangita, etc., not just the four that we have defined in the bylaw. So, point well made, Ms. Knight. I want to take us back, unless there's anything else to deliberate on, but I'd like to take us back to page 5. Our recommendation, and I feel like we have provided direction. And the direction in all this conversation that we've had be included to our decision report. That goes back to Council for clarification. Yep. Are we comfortable with today's discussion?
Second.
Moved by Councillor Foster. All those in favour? Aye. All those opposed? Carried. Is there anything else that we needed to, that is at top of mind for the staff around process moving forward, or do you want to make a comment in regards to that?
I just wanted to double check that you were okay with that recommendation around the photography, that visibility, that wasn't explicit in the technical process.
If you mean the media...
Yeah, just double checking that that's included in that direction, if you're happy with that. Yeah. Just as a minor clarification, it did come up in one of the submitters. Sorry, it'll be right towards the end.
Nothing popped out at me reading it.
Page 21, paragraph 73 onwards. So that we're just checking if you're okay with the suggested. It's very minor, and I wasn't requiring a bit of
it was about the...
Yeah, so the submitter had talked about in terms of the role around preserving heritage, etc.
Yeah.
With the taking of photos, and they concerned that that might be captured in the way it was currently written. That was the submission point.
I'm comfortable with. Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. It just for clarification, it was around supporting the heritage photography, but being explicit that it's not commercial or media, so we don't have someone selling those to getty images and all those kind of things.
Yeah, so that I think the particular word was changing from editorial to media as well, so just tidy it up.
And again, I appreciate you bringing this up, Ms. Knight, because it is good for the record to have that we had this discussion, and that's explicitly what is meant by that for that documentation, historian kind of part, not for the commercialisation of people's headstones. Well, with that, I'll start for the time. The next steps is report is written and it comes back to which council?
I think it will go to the June council meeting, so there will be time to do, I guess, the more normal process with the panel this time. So Karma will make a draft reflecting your discussions and your recommendations to council, and then she'll circulate it to you via email to make sure that we've accurately captured what your points were and your recommendations to council, and then that will go to the June meeting. So we've got a really great lead in this one.
Right, thank you very much, staff. I do just want to acknowledge you, Calvin, for the hard work that you do down at Taruhiru and across our community. I hear a lot of positive things. Acknowledge that your job is a very nuanced, very sensitive job, because you're dealing with whānau at a point in their lives when they experience immense grief. And despite that, here in the community, you're able to carry those conversations with support and with whanangi. So I do just want to acknowledge you in regards to that, Mr. Tamihere. Absolutely awesome. Thank you very much to staff for bringing this to us, and thank you very much to our hearings panel.